Hi, everyone. Hi. Oh, thank you. This is, after a big storm, this is the best thing that could have happened. Thank you.
Sure.
All right.
Oh, tea.
This, of all things I thought I'd be doing today, this is probably not one of them. And I'm so thrilled to be here, as I'm sure everyone else here is. So thank you very much, Iceland, for having us. I love how, oh, he's gone. Okay. We're here to talk about investment and investment in climate technology, which I happen to think, and I think you guys probably share this notion, that it is probably the biggest economic opportunity of our lifetime. So it's not only about, seeing the negative sides. We need to also believe that by investing in the technology, just like Climeworks has mentioned now, we will get there. And here we have 4 dedicated investors that are investing into a better future. And so I would like to ask each one of you what a better future means to you and your fund. How do you define it? Elevator pitch, each one of you. We don't have a lot of time.
Who goes first?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was stupid. Okay, so we decided that better doesn't mean anything, really, because it means different things for different people. And it's not converging energies into anything that is either sustainable or fair or anything like that. So we started by saying, okay, what is the future that we want to build? Because as you all know, money is power. And therefore, investing is not predicting the future. It's not a bet. You're actually acting upon the future, right? You're crafting the society that we will all live in 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. So the true question you should ask yourself as an investor, what is the future that, with my money, I want to be contributing to? And so when having all that discussion internally, we ended up with saying we want to contribute to a fertile future. Fertile means it is productive, as you're saying, but it's also adaptive. It adapts naturally to technological, environmental, social changes. And it's also out of this kind of industrialization, standardization thing that we've been through, but saying we need to have this diverse solution and multi-local and really embrace that what life is all about and brings it. And so then we decided, how do we reach that? What does it actually mean? What are the conditions that we can say we actually live in a fertile future? And we said one is we all need to eat and eat in a healthful manner, and that's absolutely not a given when you look into it in 2050, and we're gonna be 10 billion people. Number 2 is how can we all take care of our body and mind, meaning being healthy on a daily basis. Number 3 is how can we live and produce in a sustainable manner, because we all know that that's also not a given to how we inhabited this earth and how we can also produce without putting all this carbon in the atmosphere and all that. Number 4 is how can we change the educative and cultural model so that everybody can actually contribute to that fertile future, because you can act upon what you understand, and there's a lot of things that we actually don't know, so it's very difficult to act in the right direction. And number 5 is how can we restore trust within societies so that we can have democracy who function and peace and no fake news and all that kind of stuff, but also how can we also have trust within the economy with insurance models that are covering us from the new risk and the banking industry financing the transition in the long run. So that's what we're trying to do.
And that's the product that you came up with is 2050?
Yes.
Which is an evergreen fund?
Yeah, so then you say, okay, but how do we go there? Because that's the goal and the mission, but you actually, when you ask yourself the question, okay, how are we gonna all eat and eat in a healthful manner, and you start deep diving into all the problems of the food sector to see how we can build a food resilience system, well, you see there's nodes at every single steps of the value chain. And some of these nodes can be solved by a company because there can be a business model to solve them, like disrupting an industry or things like that. But some of them cannot be solved by a company. There's no business model because it's a regulatory issue, for example. You need advocacy. Or it's a pure research problem, or it's education, it's knowledge that we don't know, or it's open data or open resources, social infrastructures that are needed. So basically, it's commons. So we decided not to invest in companies only, but in ecosystems, because that's the only way we can ensure the transition. So that means 10% of the money we're investing is dedicated to funding these open and strategic resources so that it can accelerate these market shifts. So that's the number one thing we did. And the other thing is you want to solve these problems in time. So you want that the company you're funding are not creating new problems, right? And therefore, we try to build an aligned model for the venture capital industry, saying how can we ourselves have a product that is allowing companies to align their business interests with those of society and the planet, and we thought that the only way to do that was to build an evergreen fund.
Great. And Seth?
Yeah, so I think the question was, what does better look like? What's the future we're working towards? We do have a firm view on what better is and what worse is. Worse is more suffering, better is more joy. And so that's the kind of future that we want to help bring about, specifically through technology entrepreneurship. I think you're also, on point when you said we can't just run away from something. We have to run towards something, right? We have to have a vision for a hopeful future. And so I think when it comes to climate in particular, the future that we're trying to help run towards is one where we can travel as much as we want, make whatever we want, wear whatever we want, eat whatever we want, super high quality things at low cost in a way that does not destroy the natural habitat, right? And allows us to do that sustainably. Another way of saying that is sustainable abundance. And we think the greatest lever for bringing about that future, though regulation is important and education is important, we think the greatest lever for doing that is technology entrepreneurship, right? Is just to build new technologies that allow us to live the lives that we all want to live, but in a way that is no longer destructive for the environment. Our fund name is based off of a Winston Churchill essay that was actually written in 1931, where he predicts synthetic biology, nuclear power, genetic engineering, satellite telephony, just insane, far-sighted. He predicts clean meat, so he predicts growing meat without animals in 1931, so incredible sort of deep tech insight. And then in the second part of the essay, he talks about how because the pace of technology is advancing so rapidly, it's more important than ever that a technologist take a principled approach to their work, because otherwise we might accelerate really fast, but in the wrong direction. So we want to make sure as 50 years that we accelerate really fast, but in the right direction.
Great.
Yeah, and I really love the less suffering, more joy framework. I think that's really powerful. And so when it comes to climate, I think that means basically we need to go from a little more than 50 billion tons CO2 emitted today to close to zero as fast as possible, net zero by mid-century. And in parallel to that, we need to build a new industry, which is like CDR, negative emissions, to pump CO2 from the atmosphere and sequester it durably. So we saw a great example with the Climeworks and Calfix collaboration. And we need to go from like very, very little, almost nothing today, to like this massive industry in like 3 or 4 decades. So that's really massive. So for me, a world is a world in which we manage to meet that challenge on time to avoid as much suffering as possible from the effects of climate change. And in parallel to that, for me, a better future is a future where we can unlock the incredible talent from the misfits in academia, in industry, who have maybe crazy ideas or really creative spark and who don't fit where they are today. And their talent could be used to for much higher impact if we could find them and build great teams to build the defining companies of the future that will be like the clean net zero industry of the new century.
Great. And Ari?
I think the way I see it is it's about doing more with less. And it's about knowing that through technological innovation and deploying technologies that in many cases already exist, scaling them, you can build better, fundamentally sustainable products. The report came out recently suggesting that we're already on track within 5 or 6 years to hit the 1.2 degree temperature increase. And so we're kind of running out of time, and we need to find ways of doing more with less. And it can't be about sort of doom and gloom. It's about figuring out how do we deploy the technologies that are already there, how do we use capital to essentially direct human, creative capacity towards solving these problems. And it's possible, but we need to transition the whole economy to kind of a fundamentally more sustainable basis. And it's not just about carbon capture, decarbonization, which is obviously very important. It's also about ecosystem preservation. Nature is a very, very complex system, and we need to kind of keep the whole system in mind as we innovate. I love what you talked about, Seth, in terms of kind of making sure that we're running in the right direction. And we can't just think about greenhouse gases. We also have to think about biodiversity, habitat preservation, more efficient use of resources. But what gives me a lot of hope is if you think about a technology like electric vehicles that are now rolling out at a very, very rapid clip, that's a fundamentally better technology, and it's an example of doing more with less. It's an example of how, we can come up with new ways of doing things that are objectively better. Driving an EV is more pleasant than driving a combustion engine car. Living in a city with a high penetration of electric vehicles is better because the air quality is better, they're less noisy, and we kind of need to look at that model and apply it across the economy. Every single sector needs to sort of transition to a more sustainable fundamental basis, and that's kind of the North Star in the investment we do.
Okay, so we have all of your investors. I used to be an investor, so I'm going to be a little harsh on you guys. When I started investing about 12 years ago, the notion of software as a service just did not exist, which is hard to believe today if you're selling software. And so the metrics you look at today just did not exist 10 years ago, and which means that we wouldn't have made a lot of the investments today that we did make 10 years ago because the bar was so low, right? My question to you is, Seth, to begin with, you've been investing in this space for the longest, 7 years, is it? How have the metrics that you look at evolved during these 7 years, and what do you look for investments today? Or you look in for, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so we're I think the context here is we're pre-seed and seed partners to founders. So we typically back founders when it's just the founders and a janky prototype that kind of sort of works. I think that fundamental ingredients that we look for actually haven't changed that much. We try and be a bit more humble and not bring too many frameworks around the SaaS metrics or anything for the exact reason you mentioned, right? Things change, and the only people that fundamentally know how they're going to change are the people that are changing them, the entrepreneurs, right? Not the VCs in some room with a whiteboard. We also take the same approach when it comes to technology. Some VCs say, they sort of map out where the world is going, and they say, oh, I want 20% healthcare and 10% carbon sequestration and 15%. And we think that every single fundamental breakthrough in history, at some point there were 5 to 10 people in the world that knew that it was even possible and saw how the world was going to change because of it. And those are the 5 to 10 people in the lab that just figured it out. And so if we map out where we think the world is going, the only thing I can guarantee you is that we will be definitely wrong. And so what we try and do, and what we have done for the last 7 years, is we try and find really brilliant engineers and researchers and technologists and scientists who have a deep, almost emotional or rational connection to solving the problem that they're addressing, who have an intense growth mindset, who have a great dynamic between them, and who are solving a fundamental human problem, and then we support them and help them build a great business. So it's really that simple. That's our very simple recipe that we've been applying for the last 7 years.
That's great. Thank you. And Benjamin, you, with your venture studio model, you're taking a lot of responsibility in the sense that you're saying, we're going to go out and build a whole bunch of companies that are doing the right thing. How do you figure out what the right thing is and who to invest into?
Yeah, so I guess it's right to point out that we are a venture studio. So the difference with a regular investor is that we do not invest in existing companies. We build the companies from scratch. I mean, not by ourselves. We partner with great scientists, engineers, operators who have great ideas around a problem space that we want to focus on. That can be within carbon removal or decarbonization and so on. And we focus on problems where there's like billion-ton potential reduction and billion-dollar market, like very, very huge markets, so that the companies can be self-sustaining. And we try to look for basically areas where there's maybe like not enough shots on goal or where we think there's more ideas to be developed. And we partner with someone who has exactly the right type of skill sets to unlock new ideas and approach within that space. But when we bet on one first founder to explore one area, we don't have and I kind of agree with what said on that front, we don't have a predefined thought on, okay, that person should do exactly that idea. we trust that our collaboration and our work together will lead us to something that's that we couldn't even foresee in the future. So we predefine the space, the opportunity space, but we don't predefine the exact company ID we're going to work on with that person.
Got it. Thank you. And Ari, you have been you've come out of, just like Marie and myself, software investing, which is somewhat radically different from what ends up being quite a lot of the time capex heavy investments. How do you think about that, and how, what are you struggling with not using as much metrics as you would in software right now?
So the first question we ask ourselves when we look at a company is, how does this company kind of meaningfully drive forward the transition we need to, that we need to go through? And for some companies, it's decarbonization of existing economic activity. For other companies, it's doing more with the resources that we have. And so we keep a fairly open mind, but every company that we back has to, in some way, contribute to sustainability by virtue of growing. We like partnering with true believers, people that really believe in what they're doing. They're not there opportunistically. They really have a kind of a vision of how the company, by virtue of growing, will preserve the environment. In terms of investing in kind of higher capex or companies that are doing something in the physical world, it's of course very different from software. And what we do is we partner with scientists and folks that really kind of have a deep understanding of the assumptions that the companies are building on, and we work with them to kind of verify the assumptions, to kind of really go deep on understanding the extent to which this is feasible and the extent to which this is scalable. We're investing on a longer time horizon than typical VCs, but we still want to back companies that within a 2-3 year period can start to get to meaningful scale through what they do. And so what we look at is really to try to unpack, how quickly can this technology be deployed, how quickly can this scale, and is it economically feasible? And it's a different approach to investing in software or kind of low capex type businesses. But it's still about building a business, and it's still about timelines, it's still about scalability, it's still about understanding, do the economics work? Ultimately, if the economics don't work, you're not going to scale whatever thing you're building. And so it's a learning curve, but it's just about working with the right people to be able to understand how quickly can something scale up.
I think Ari made a great point. It's something that is often overlooked in this space, which is that these have to become great businesses at some point, right? The traditional metrics of what makes a great business, high growth rate, good margins, free cash flow, need to apply, right? Yeah. I think we see I know we're not supposed to talk about Web3, but we see in the Web3 space this belief that the fundamental aspects of a business somehow don't apply, right? And it's just token go up and everything's going to be great. And it's wait, what? What value are you creating? Where's the cash flows? And I think in any space that is truly mission driven, you sometimes see people who forget that if your lever is market forces and if your lever is business, you have to build a great business, right? So we have something we call the Mr. Burns test. Mr. Burns, for those that don't know, is this character on The Simpsons. He's the archetype of a greedy industrial capitalist who only cares about himself. And we want to see a company build a product at scale that Mr. Burns would buy, right? Not because he gives a crap about the environment, but because it's the best, cheapest, most convenient thing he possibly can. And we think that if your lever is going to be market forces, that's a really important dynamic.
Okay.
No.
I love that because I had to look back here and see if the word impact was anywhere on the slide. I'm really happy it isn't, because I think all of us agree that the moment you put the word impact onto a slide deck, it comes at a discount to economic performance, which I think none of us believe. And it's a shame that it's seen that way, because it should be the other way around. You should be looking at it from the perspective of every single company has an impact. It's just up to you to determine how much you over or underplay it. So I want to ask you something. I want to turn the tables a little bit. And before I do that, I'd love for somebody from the crew to let us know how much time we have before people are getting really held up before the break. 5 minutes? 5 minutes? Okay. Okay, then we're going to go into the hot seat type of question. A lot of money has flown into climate-related investments in the past 2 years. Irrespective of what's happening now, the unfortunate events around the world, the economic downturn, there is a lot of capital that's dry powder waiting to be deployed. We're talking, I think about $30 billion have been reserved or announced in the past 2 years. Small funds, large funds. What is your single biggest worry?
It's not enough. If we look at how much money needs to flow into climate technology over the next 10 years, we're looking at something like 10% of the world's investable capital needing to flow into climate technology for us to kind of really make the progress we need to make within a 20-year window, let's say. And so, 30 billion is really nothing in the grand scheme of things. If we look at the economic activity of the world, 30 billion is, it's barely a drop in the ocean. And so we need more. We need more capital. Ultimately, capital is just a way to direct resources towards a particular problem set. And while we only have, 30 billion flowing into the space in the last year, we're not allocating enough resources as a planet towards solving the climate crisis. And so my only worry is that it's not enough. We need more, and we urgently need more capital flowing into this.
I completely agree. Yeah. I mean, that is less than might get spent on a single war in a single country per year. And this is one of the greatest challenges humanity has ever faced. It's already here, and it's going to take a mobilization far greater than any war we've ever seen to fix it, right? And so 30 billion, I agree, it's just there's no way it's enough.
But hold on, is nobody worried about greenwashing? I mean, I am, for sure.
Oh, is the question like, maybe is that 30 billion not actually climate capital?
Yeah.
For sure, yeah. Which is another reason it's not enough.
Sorry, I'm like dropping words into
No,
we need even more.
I think, listen, I like that there's greenwashing because, I'll say why. When we started 50 or 7 years ago, everyone thought we were crazy that you could make money and sort of like solve the climate crisis at the same time. We're saying, no, it's actually will help you make money. People go, that's insane. The fact that there's greenwashing is a sign that a lot of the sort of purely greedy capitalists that don't care at all also think that there's money to be made here, right? And that they know that their talent cares about it, and they know that their LPs care about it. And so it's a sign that this movement is starting to enter the mainstream. Of course, it's not great for the ecosystem that there's greenwashing, and I wish that it didn't happen. But for me, it's a sign that we're heading in the right direction and that more of the minds that control capital are starting to acknowledge that this is actually a really phenomenal opportunity, even if they don't fundamentally.
I think it's a gateway drug.
It's a gateway drug.
David
I like
says
that.
it's a gateway drug. Okay. With that in mind, concluding remarks, because I think we're close to our 5-minute allocation. Marie.
Yeah, I think one of the things I would be worried about is that people believe it's a sector. It's not a sector. It's a complete transformation of the economy that we're living, just like the digital transformation. And it's going to disrupt all industries the exact same way, right? So, and it actually is driven by the same type of characteristic as the digital transformation. You said it, it's young people, talents, it's researchers, entrepreneurs who are pushing these changes through behavioral changes, and consumers are asking for that, and talents want to work for these type of companies, and individual investors want their money not to harm the planet, not to harm society anymore. So it's really pushed by the people at the individual level and the usages, and then it's pushed by regulation, which digital was not. And it's accelerated by the whole natural changes, so I believe it's going to be even faster as a transformation, and all the industries should be within that. So you're totally right. What we're funding are tomorrow's champions.
Yep. Software was eating the world until now, and now I think climate tech is going to start eating it. Benjamin, last words.
And I mean, I think a lot of people focus on like VC, like venture money for climate, but I think there's like parts in the investment cycle where there's big gaps. Like for instance, money to fund first-of-a-kind plant or nth-of-a-kind plant, like the first actual physical unit, where like VC is not the right tool for that. And there's not enough investors focusing on like building these new financial vehicles for these first units, because a lot of the companies that are being funded right now, when they're going to put steel on the ground, cement on the ground, they'll need to have access to this type of financing. There are some options, but not enough. So I think, I wish more investors were focused on launching funds like that, I think.
On that note, any investors in the room or policymakers, that's a call to action.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, thank you everyone for today, and we look forward to being back and looking back on how much success Iceland has made with regards to this climate journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.